everyone, and thank you for joining today's special DreamWakers Daily Conversation in celebration of Earth Day. Today, we're speaking with Dr. Randall Kosaki. Dr. Kosaki coordinates and conducts research for the Papahanaumokuākea Marine National Monument in Hawaii. Dr. Kosaki's specialization is exploring very deep coral reefs in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're excited about this conversation.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I'd love to start out by just hearing a little bit more about this monument. When I think of a monument, I live in Washington, D.C., so I think of, the Washington Monument, Lincoln Memorial, those types of monuments. But obviously, you work for one that's very different. So can you give us a little bit of background on the Papahanaumokuākea Marine National Monument? What is it? How big is it? And how did it come to be labeled a monument?
I'm sure, most people, when you think of a monument, you think of something in the park that pigeons sit on. But monuments can be designated to protect any areas of the United States that have special cultural, archaeological, scientific, or biological interests. So in this case, our monument is not a man-made edifice, but it's a part of the ocean that's special and seemed to warrant an extra high level of protection. So Papahanaumokuākea encompasses the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands, which is the uninhabited portion of our chain. I'll try and share this picture if I can. There, are you seeing that?
Yes.
Okay, so if you can see my cursor, these are the main Hawaiian Islands, the inhabited islands. So most maps of Hawaii that you look at just show these islands. These are where people live. These are where tourists visit. When in fact 2/3 of the Hawaiian archipelago are uninhabited coral reefs, atolls, and small islands. And so this is Papahanaumokuākea. It's a coral reef. It's an ocean environment. Dry land is less than 1% of the area of the monument. And it's 580,000 square miles, which is kind of hard to get your mind around, but it's an enormous area of ocean. It's twice the size of Texas. And so this is Papahanaumokuākea. In the late 1990s, the U.S. government started to look at what are these things called coral reefs? Do we have any of them? Where are they? And what they came to realize is that something like 70% of the coral reefs in the United States are in this area called the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. And because they're so remote, because they're uninhabited, they're essentially pristine areas. And so this is one of the last great wild areas left anywhere on the planet. So it's like the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge or the African Serengeti. It's a last great wild place. So this is Papahanaumokuākea.
Wow. That picture is so helpful to give kind of a bit of scale to it. That's incredible.
And if you superimpose that image on North America, the Hawaiian archipelago would go from New Orleans to Las Vegas. So it would cover more than half of North America.
Wow, that's
an enormous area of ocean.
Yeah, amazing. So in your work as Deputy Superintendent there, it's also under NOAA, right, which is the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. So can you explain a little bit about what NOAA does and who they are and how your career path kind of led you to this point?
NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, is kind of like a parallel to NASA, National Aeronautics and Space Administration. So we say that NASA takes care of space and skies. NOAA takes care of seas and skies. So the National Weather Service is in NOAA, National Marine Fisheries Service is in NOAA. So anything having to do with the atmospheres or the oceans, scientifically and management-wise, is in NOAA.
Interesting. Okay, that makes sense. So during this current pandemic, obviously there's been a lot of changes. Has your day-to-day been affected at all by that?
Yeah, it's been affected in a lot of ways, some for the better, some not so much. Cabin fever is something to deal with, like basically never leaving the house. On the other hand, it is kind of nice not to have to slog through rush hour traffic. So an extra hour a day in the morning, I get to go out, go for a 5-mile run before I start work. Most of the work I do is either in the field in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands, maybe a month of the year. And then when I'm back in the office, then I'm sitting at a computer like I am now. So actually my day-to-day office work is not that different. And I actually have a better computer at home than at work. So I'm kind of thinking I might never go back. It's been kind of a mix of pros and cons. Working from home, you never leave home. On the other hand, you don't have to leave home.
Yeah, I know. A lot of it is a mixed bag. I think a lot of people are feeling that way. Can you tell us a little bit more about what some of the biggest challenges currently are for the Papahanaumokuakea Marine National Monument?
Well, like I mentioned, it's remote, it's uninhabited. So people think, well, it's in good shape. We don't have to worry about it. So there are no people there. So there's no nearshore pollution. There's no overfishing. Things that we can manage locally are not there. So a lot of local anthropogenic stressors are not a problem for us. With that said, we're not immune to global scale problems. Climate change is probably the big one. The rising sea surface temperatures, global warming, seawater acidification, all of these things are going to have profound impacts on coral reefs worldwide. Marine debris is probably the other really big problem that we have. And again, that's not something you can manage locally because we get a lot of trash that washes up from from North America, from Asia, from anywhere in the world that ocean currents could carry them here. We get that trash piling up on our beaches. And so we're remote, we're relatively pristine, but we're not immune to these big global problems.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So obviously you love the ocean and you've been drawn to it since you were young based on the readings that we've done about you. How has the ocean changed over the course of your lifetime, both in the ways that you interact with it and the effects of climate change?
Well, I've been a lifelong recreational fisherman, and
Mhm.
that's one way that I've really seen some changes in the ocean, and that fishing is just not what it used to be when I was a kid. When I was 7 or 8 years old, my dad would take me to the beach. We'd take a little charcoal barbecue and throw our lines in the water, and we'd catch fish and we'd grill it up for lunch. And now, if you go to the beach and you want to have lunch and you want to go fishing, I would really recommend that you take a bucket of fried chicken or bring your food with you because being able to catch fish almost at will is not the case anymore. We really have overfished our nearshore stocks. And so
Mhm.
that's one big decline that I've seen in my lifetime. But it's not all bad news. So when I was a kid, I'd go snorkeling and seeing green sea turtles was something to write home about. It was something pretty unusual. But since they've been protected I believe since the early 70s, the green sea turtles have made an amazing numerical comeback, and now you see them everywhere. And so there are some ways in which we've had some deleterious impacts on the ocean, and there are some ways where we've kind of gotten our act together and we actually have managed to improve management of marine resources. So it's a mixed thing. Most things, it's a mixed bag. Some things have not gotten better, and some things have. But it's the ones that have gotten better that give me hope that if we improve our management, we continue to have more of an environmental conscious, and we actually can have this impact on a much broader scale on the oceans.
Yeah, absolutely. When over the course of your lifetime, when did you decide that you wanted your career to be focused on advocating for the environment and marine conservation?
There was never really a moment when I just woke up and said, I want to be a marine biologist, I want to work in conservation biology. It's all a hobby that's kind of gotten way out of hand. Like I mentioned, I grew up diving, spearfishing, fishing, surfing. Like a lot of kids in Hawaii, that's what we do in the summertime. We go to the beach a lot. And it kind of snowballed from an avocation into a vocation. And I had some really good teachers in middle school and high school and also in college that mentored me and kind of showed me that what you love to do as a hobby, you could turn into a career. And as I mentioned, during my lifetime, I've become more and more aware of the impacts that we're having to the ocean. As much as I love to fish, there also is such a thing as too much of a good thing. And so I think that kind of helped to form my environmental conscience. Is seeing what how fishing has changed during my lifetime. That we need to care for the ocean because then in turn it will care for us. It's a reciprocal relationship. Certainly not against fishing, but I think we need to implement more responsible fishing. And if we take care of the ocean, it'll take care of us. And generally, what's good for fish is good for fishermen. And so, maybe from my very selfish perspective, I want to continue to catch fish. I want my son and my children to continue to catch fish in their lifetimes. And the only way that's going to happen is if we take better care of our marine resources. So, there never really was a point when I said, I want to work in conservation or I want to be a marine biologist. It's all been a kind of very, very natural, comfortable evolution.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a perfect lead into the next question, which is just about, you've cultivated this love of the ocean, you've landed in conservation. For people watching who maybe obviously aren't in Hawaii and don't necessarily interact with the ocean every day, what other ways are there for us to be caring for the ocean or to be more cognizant of how we can be helpful?
Well, it's good to be aware of the impacts that we all have, even if you don't live on the coast. If you drive a gas guzzler and if you're driving up greenhouse gas emissions, you're having an impact on oceans and coral reefs many thousands of miles away. Those plastic water bottles that we sometimes use, abuse, and throw away. A lot of that plastic winds up in the ocean. So even if you live far, far from the ocean, there are still pretty small changes in your lifestyle that you can make that will greatly benefit the ocean. And really, not just the oceans, but the entire planet. So it may not sound like a big deal just to get one of these, use these instead of plastic water bottles. And it sounds like not much. You don't use a couple water bottles a day, but it aggregates up. If you times that by hundreds of millions of people on the planet, ultimately that's billions of plastic bottles that don't wind up in landfills and plastic that doesn't wind up in the ocean. So even from far away, you can actually do a lot of good for our entire global ecosystem. More specifically to caring for the oceans, just the fact that people are aware of the fact that there's a lot of interesting things in the ocean, a lot of really unique, beautiful organisms in the oceans, and they are under threat from our actions on land. That's a really awesome start because these are registered voters who will support legislation, who will support senators and representatives, who will support legislation that protects not just the oceans, but all of our global ecosystems. So there's a lot that you can do on a small scale from home that really aggregates up and creates global change.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so kind of switching gears a little bit more towards the career side of things, can you think back on your life and on your work and tell us about a challenge that you've had?
One of the challenges I had is I live in Hawaii. I'm a native Hawaiian, and there aren't a whole lot of role models in the sciences. So when I was growing up, I was kind of groping my way, finding my way blindly without really role models who I could say, oh, I want to be like that person. And so I was very lucky as a high school student and as a college student. I did have some really good mentors that encouraged me and did tell me, if you're interested in the oceans, if you love to fish, you love to dive, there's no reason why you couldn't make a career out of that. And I think that's changing. When I look around now at a lot of my colleagues and a lot of the up and coming young scientists, there are a lot of role models for people in the minorities, for Native Hawaiians, or so I think that is changing rapidly and for the better. And so that kind of awareness that you can do anything you want. If you're interested in it, if you're passionate about it, you should pursue it. The role models, people to encourage that kind of mentality, I think are there in place now. So I think the future looks bright for a very, very inclusive future to science.
Absolutely. That's a big part of why DreamWakers exists. We really want people to see people who look like themselves and in the jobs that they might be interested in doing. That's such an important thing to note.
Yeah.
And then,
Yeah, challenges. I don't know if I should go here, but the other challenge I faced was internal, in that I wasn't ever the best student in the class. Long, sordid story, but when I was a senior in high school, I got expelled from high school. Then I almost flunked out of college here at the University of Hawaii, which was really bad because when I was flunking out of the University of Hawaii, my dad was the chancellor of the University of Hawaii. But I got my act together, again, thanks to some really good mentors. And, returned to the scene of previous crimes. Eventually got a PhD, achieved some level of academic redemption, which made my parents happy. But I think really the take-home message here is not that, people should think it's fine to flunk out of school. But really the message is, even if you're not valedictorian, you can still achieve some kind of academic redemption. You can still pursue these things, even if you're not the smartest person in the class. And so that, I think, is a really important message that sometimes seems to resonate with young people. Actually, this story better than, yeah, I have a PhD, I'm a research scientist, yeah, I use fast computers, but I think if you're passionate about something and you want to pursue it, there's nothing really to stop you except maybe yourself.
mm-hmm. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's something all of our students do need to hear, because you're not gonna be a straight A student all the time. People have different challenges, different struggles, and it's good to know that you can still pursue your dreams. Thank you for sharing. You can definitely go there. Actually, so I'm just kind of have another question related to that. What kind of got you out of that rut? Like, how did you end up deciding to go on to get a PhD?
Again, it came down to really good mentors, like faculty that really cared about me. And I'm sure all students out there know when they've had good teachers and not so good teachers. I would really recommend seeking out those good teachers, forming relationships with them. because those are the people that will change your lives for the better. And it doesn't have to be all your teachers. It could be just one or two really good teachers that you just click with, or what they say resonates with you. Reach out to them, get to know them, because those are the people that will open doors for you, that will encourage you. When you're kind of feeling down, they'll bring you back up. And so I think mentors are maybe one of the most important things about schooling and education in general, and not just in the sciences, but a few good mentors will change your life for the better, and those changes will resonate throughout your life for decades beyond that. So find those mentors, find those good teachers, make relationships with them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a beautiful piece of advice. Thank you. So kind of a fun question. What is the best part of your job? What do you love about it?
Oh, going diving, by far. It's just, like I said, it's a hobby that's gotten way out of control.
Yeah.
The other 11 months of the year, I'm sitting here in front of my computer, because the fun part of science is going diving. People don't realize that when the ship hits the dock, you're not done. That's actually when the work starts, to write up your findings for scientific publication, to write grant proposals to fund next year's research. But I love the diving. Some of the diving we do is very deep. We're going 300 feet and deeper, which is far deeper than most scuba divers go. And so it's not rocket science, but the things that we see, because we're going to such a remote area, and we're going deeper than anyone's ever gone, a lot of what we find is completely new to science. And I'm a fish biologist. Maybe I could just see if I can pull up a couple of pictures.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not too quick at this screen sharing thing.
That's okay.
There we go. Or not.
Yeah,
this is a little butterfly fish we found up in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. And it's a new species. It's completely new to science. Never been seen before by scientists. We actually named it after another diver who helped us to collect some of these specimens. This is another, it's called a wrasse. It's a new species of wrasse. We haven't been able to give it a name yet, because we need to compare it to its closest relatives to make sure that it is in fact different. And we're quite confident that it is, but its nearest relatives live in southern Japan. So until I get to southern Japan to discover this, we probably won't. A few years ago in 2016, we were out diving about the time when President Obama enlarged the monument. He quadrupled our size to 580,000 square miles. So we found this new species of fish, and we thought, well, why don't we name it after President Obama to commemorate what I think was a visionary act to protect an enormous tract of ocean. So this is the fun part of my job, is finding beautiful things like this that no scientist has ever seen before. And while it's way above my pay grade to talk to the president, when President Obama came out to Hawaii 4 years ago, he actually went up to Midway Atoll, which is in the monument. And that's Dr. Sylvia Earle, famous oceanographer. So she presented him with a picture of the fish that we discovered, and he kind of blessed it to say that, yes, that'd be great to name it after him. It's more than just fishes. There's a lot of undescribed invertebrates. This is a new species of sea cucumber, sea urchin from probably 300 feet. New species of algae. This is actually where I'll stop sharing, because I have, I said I'm a fish biologist, but really I also like to find just about anything that's never been seen before. And these are some new species of algae from 300 feet and deeper. When you say algae, a lot of people think of green pond scum or things that are not so attractive. These are not that. These are some of the most beautiful plants in the ocean. And all of these are completely new to science. No human being has ever laid eyes on these before. And while I'm not the algae specialist that will write these up, I collect them and I turn them over to scientists who have that expertise. And so many of these are going to be named after researchers that have helped us, and things like that. And these are really, really beautiful plants. None of these have been seen by human eyes before. These are all completely new to science. And so some of these, in fact, we're going through a native Hawaiian naming process. So there's scientific name, the Latin name, if you will be a Hawaiian name in perpetuity. And not just naming it Waikiki or slapping some Hawaiian word on it. It's through a Hawaiian process. And it's really the thought process that matters. So for us native Hawaiians, when you're naming something, whether it's a canoe or a child or a new species of algae, it's that name that gives it life. And so that's a very significant thing. And so we've met with many of the elders or kupuna in our Hawaiian community, and they've helped us to come up with names for these. So these will be the formal scientific names, and they will also be Hawaiian words. And so that's one way I think we will fundamentally change science for the better. Because I've traveled over much of the insular Pacific doing coral reef research, and you hear the same story everywhere you go. Yeah, the scientists came, they got their specimens, got their data, they went back to America, and we never heard from them again. And so I'm trying to change that. And hopefully by giving these species Hawaiian names, that gives them a place-based identity that will last in perpetuity. So these are the scientific names in perpetuity. So it's fun to dive too deep. It's fun to discover things no one sees before. And then it's also fun to kind of reconnect with your culture and bring that back and give them Hawaiian names. So yeah, I love my job, in case you can't tell. It's a lot of fun. And I feel really, really lucky that I've been able to pursue this as a career.
That's incredible. And I love that you get to have that piece of the respect for the culture that's going to go on forever. That's beautiful. Amazing. Well, if there are students out there who are interested in conservation related jobs, do you have recommendations for what kind of classes or skills they should acquire as they're working towards that?
Yeah, it's going to depend on what field of conservation you're most interested in. So you could go the more scientific route and major in botany or zoology or whatever organisms you're interested in. There also are academic courses that are more oriented towards management of natural resources and policy. Policy really is where the rubber meets the road. That's where things like monuments are created to protect natural resources. That's where regulations on their use and management come into being. So you could be anything from a zoology major to a political science major. As long as you maintain in your mind your focus that you want to work in conservation biology, you can steer virtually any academic path in that direction. You could even be an English major and become a natural history writer. So it's not just for scientists. I think there's something in conservation biology and biology in general for anyone that has an interest in the natural world.
Great. Well, this is a question again that I'm just kind of coming up with right now as I'm talking to you. I loved how you were sharing a bit about your passion and your culture and how you didn't necessarily have role models growing up that looked like you or that gave you this idea that you could be this. So do you have, I know that's changing a little bit and we touched on that, but do you have advice or anything you would want to say to a younger you who is maybe interested in a career path and doesn't necessarily see people who look like them in that career path?
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with being the first or the trailblazer. The advice that I got from one of my mentors is advice that I try to live. And it's that, no matter how far and how high life takes you, don't forget your roots. And don't forget to look back and lend a helping hand to those that would like to follow in your footsteps. And so maybe that's how I know I'm getting old, is more and more I've come to value that opportunity to give back and to mentor up-and-coming students. And so I don't think I've ever said no to a request from a student, whether it's for can you come speak to my class, or do you have an opportunity to be an intern in your lab? I really see that as the future of science, especially we live in Hawaii, so for those of us that are native Hawaiian, really this is kind of bringing all your values home to roost, is in caring for our natural resources that our ancestors protected for us and that we can protect for our children and their grandchildren. And so it's all very much a place-based thing for me. But really, I think one of the most important things I do now, beyond just discovering new species, which I find very, very gratifying, but I think the most important thing now is to provide opportunities for the next generation. So the students that follow behind me will have even better opportunities than I did. So that's kind of my worldview, is that really it only matters if it matters to people. And students are probably the most important people I'll deal with, because one of them is going to take my job, when I retire, and I want someone good to take that job. And so I have everything to gain by really helping every student that I possibly can.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing that. I love that. And we're running a little bit low on time, but I have a couple questions left for you. Sort of a fun one in celebration of Earth Day. I have a hunch of what your answer is going to be, but what is your favorite place on Earth?
It's the beach. I love going to the beach. I've been doing it since I was a kid, and it's beautiful. It's rewarding on so many levels. It's fun. Even though Hawaii is getting more and more populated, there still are some lonely, isolated beaches you can have where you can have solitude and time for introspection and to commune with, to connect with the natural world. I think as we see more and more concrete and more buildings and roads and highways on land, it becomes more and more important to once in a while have a little time to kind of bond with the natural world and remind us of what's important, and really to remind us of how small we are. That's what I actually like about getting in the ocean, is it makes me feel about this big. It reminds us of how big and powerful and awesome the natural world is, how beautiful it is, and how relatively insignificant human beings are. And so, yeah, um, for Earth Day, at some point, I'll probably just go down to the beach and watch the sunset over the ocean.
Oh, that sounds gorgeous. Amazing. And just one final question to sort of wrap up this conversation and bring it home. Are there a couple of things that you want viewers to take away from the conversation we've had today?
I think maybe if there's a take home message, is that whatever you're passionate about, you can find some way to pursue it. Um, there really are no boundaries in what you can and cannot do. And so that's for you to figure out what you're passionate about, what you love. And if you're lucky, as I have been, you might actually get to do that for a career. And so then it's not so much like going to work every day, it's doing something you love. And so that's what I would encourage people to do is figure out what you love to do and try to pursue that.
Mhm. That's a great take home message. Figure out what you love to do and then pursue it. That's perfect. Thank you. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, for giving your time. I know you're very busy, and we appreciate you taking on these questions today.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah. And thank you everyone for watching today's DreamWakers Daily Conversation. You can keep up with all of these conversations on our Facebook page, or you can stream them live on YouTube. And you can tune in tomorrow for one more Earth Day speaker. And you can join us next week, where we'll be speaking with some of our career professionals about the concept of resilience. So happy Earth Day to everyone, and we look forward to seeing you next time.